Mark Wilson. Today I'm going to show you how to make French bread, gluten-free. We're going to go through both steps and processes. One of the key things to remember when it comes to baking is precision of measurement and having things at the proper temperature. I'm going to go ahead and get started here. When it comes to baking bread, one of the first things you really want to do is test the yeast. Because the last thing you want to do is go through the entire process of spending hours and time waiting for dough to rise when you realize that your yeast went bad. One surefire way to check this is kind of create like a sponge. You take a quarter cup of like warm water, about 105, 115 degrees. You add in the yeast. You add in 1 teaspoon of sugar to go on top of that. Kind of just let it sit. We move it around just a little bit to incorporate the two together. Let it sit off to the side for 10 to 15 minutes, and if you see it become foamy, you know you're good to go. If it looks in 10 to 15 minutes like it looks at this moment in time when you mix it together, just realize you've got some bad yeast and go grab some more. We have our water about 140 degrees. Digital thermometers are great for cooking outdoors, cooking indoors, and for baking. So I suggest you invest in it. It costs like, I think the one I bought cost $6.99. Can't go wrong with that. So here's what our yeast looks like. You see it, should be able to see before I pour it out of the bowl. It's nice and foamy, so we know that that's good to go. I'm going to go ahead and let that sit there some more. We have our ingredients we're going to use. 2 tablespoons of butter, salt, sugar, and then we're going to pour the hot water on top of that. Let it melt. All those things together. We're going to let it become room temperature, not room temperature, excuse me, lukewarm, about 100, 105 degrees. Then we'll be ready to move on. This is the gluten-free French bread that we're going to make today. And when dealing with gluten-free flour and dough, you kind of have to handle them a little bit differently than dough that has gluten in it. Because it's very dense, it's very thick, so you want to add a number of things to it to kind of lighten it up a little bit. One of apple cider vinegar. So I call for 4 tablespoons for this recipe. You won't taste that in there. But it definitely helps with the texture. Teaspoon of baking powder. Make that a tablespoon, sorry. Psyllium husk, 2 tablespoons. And that really makes it a lot lighter. One other thing that does, it also makes it absorb water like crazy. So with gluten flour, you'd use 3/4 of a cup of water. This one we're going with a 1 1/4 cups of water. We may have to add some more in it in the process. So we're just going to take a little bit of our flour, mix it in here to kind of get it going. And you want to sift it when you add flour into it. You want it as light and airy as possible. So it's just as easy as this. Get that in there. Then we're going to mix this up just to get it going. Kind of incorporate that a little bit. And then I'm going to put it over there on the KitchenAid mixer and just start adding it together. So we've got our little bit of flour, our main wet ingredients, and then if you can see, this is our yeast. Once again, for gluten-free, I found you have much greater success if you double the amount of yeast you put into it, because it is such a dense bread. And it really lightens it up and helps it rise more. Just going to mix these together, put them over there, come back in a minute, we'll roll this thing out. We have our dough mixed up. One thing about gluten-free, you really have to be careful with it. You don't want to overwork it, just the bare minimum. Otherwise it'll get really tough. So we're going to set it out here on this lightly floured surface, and we're going to let it rest for like 5 to 10 minutes. and then we'll come back and revisit this. So wash out our bowl that we were using. Gonna lightly cover it with some olive oil. Just kind of like, we're going to put the ball in there after we knead it fairly well. So make sure we have a nice covering of this for it to sit in. Because that's where it's going to rest for a few hours. And that just comes time to gently knead it, kind of work it a little bit. Just kind of press it out, fold it back in. So we've got a ball in our grease line bowl we're going to store it in. Now what we're going to do is take a rag, get it wet, warm, or hot, whichever which way. As long as it's not dripping wet. Then we're going to cover this. We're going to set this in a place where it's, kind of warm, at least room temperature. You don't want it getting cooler than it is currently. Just room temperature would be just fine as long as it's not a drafty place. And let it sit there for about an hour and a half. And gluten-free flour is going to rise probably to double the size. Gluten flour, we're hoping that it rises to at least half, maybe 3/4. If we get double the size, that's fantastic. See you in a little bit. It's been an hour and a half. At this point in time, it's really simple. See, it's doubled, almost doubled in size. So what we're going to do is just basically punch it down. We're going to push it in there. And then we're basically just going to fold it back towards the middle. Create another ball with it. And I'm going to cover it up with another. We're going to run that under some warm water. Get it heated up. Cover it again. Let it sit. It's time for 45 minutes. After that, it's going to be time to get to work with it. See you then. And there we have our gluten-free French bread. As you see, it's got a nice crust to it. I'm really looking forward to slicing this up and having it with this pasta I'm making. And I'm looking forward to having French bread out of it tomorrow. I hope you enjoy it. Drop me a message. Let me know what you think. And in a world where you can be everything, always remember to be one of the most important things. Kind. Bye. Bye.